Hey everyone, in this video we're going to come back to the story of Hercules from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles, and we're going to look at part 16 of the Hercules story, which is called the Fate of Pholus. So you might remember in the previous chapter we had Hercules being introduced to a centaur named Pholus, who he met in a cave. And the story there is that there was some wine in an amphora that the centaurs, they were saving and he wasn't supposed to touch it. And Hercules drinks it anyway. And then when the centaurs find out that Hercules, was drinking the wine, they come in and they attack him and Pholus, right? They're mad that he stole their wine, and Hercules fights them off. The thing you want to remember, the key detail you want to remember, is that Hercules starts killing them with his arrows that have been dipped in hydra blood. Remember, he has these poisoned arrows. And that's kind of where we're picking up the story. Hercules has been fighting off the centaurs. He's been using these special arrows, and now he's chased them out of the cave, and he's gone off running. And we have to understand or read about what happens to Pholus. So, like I always tell you in these, in these videos, the first thing you want to do, just make sure you have the vocab. Maybe pre-read the story, look at any words you don't know, and look them up. That way you feel really comfortable with what the words mean, because it's very hard to understand the story if you don't know the vocab. Then you want to do the read and reread method, right? So read it once, mark any areas where you're not sure what's going on, any vocab, any grammar, whatever it is that is kind of tripping you up. Write it down, still read the story, but mark anywhere that you're stuck. Then go back, fill in all the blanks, right? The gaps where you're not sure about vocab or grammar, look them up so you feel confident, and then read the story again. And on that second reading, and even if a third if you need it, it should be much easier to read and understand the story without having to pause so much and really dive into, what's this grammar form? What's this vocab word? You don't want to trip yourself up. You want to be able to read this for a story, right? Which is exactly what it is. So once you're in that place and you feel ready to go, you can dive in. So the story starts like this. You have postquam reliqui fugerot, Pholus ex spelunca egressus est, et corpora spectabat eorum qui sagatis interfecti erant. So after, right, meaning after the fight, and it's after reliqui, the others, or the rest, you might say, meaning the rest of the centaurs, fled. Fugerant is perfect tense, right? So after the rest fled, Pholus, he egressus est, he came or went out from the cave, or out of the cave, ex spelunca, right? So he comes out to see kind of what happened. And spectabat, he was watching, or he was looking at the corpora, the bodies. Now, corpora, this is neuter plural, so it's accusative. So he's talking about bodies, right, plural. Remember, Hercules has been killing a bunch of them. So he's looking at the bodies of eorum, meaning of them. In this case, you probably want to translate it as of those. It's kind of got this sense of being a demonstrative. So you could say the bodies of those who, and here's our relative clause. So it's not just anyone, it's those who interfecti erant, had been killed, right? It's pluperfect tense, right? Passive voice, had been killed by the arrows or with the arrows, right? Sagatis is ablative. It's talking about the arrows that had been, dipped in poison by Hercules. So he decides to kind of look a little closer and figure out what's been happening here. So he's looking at the bodies. Then you have magniper autem miratus est, quod tam levi vulnere ex animati erant, et causam eius rei quae reba. So greatly magniper, right? He was amazed, miratus, right? However, he was very amazed because ex animati erant, they had been killed. So ex animati here is neuter plural, nominative plural. It's talking about the centaurs, right? So the bodies is really what it's talking about. They had been killed by tam, such, or so you might say, by so light, lewi, a wound, vulnere, right? Lewi vulnere means like a light wound. So he's looking at it and he's miratus est, right? He's amazed because he's trying to figure out why did these centaurs die when it was such a light wound, right? They weren't really hurt that badly, and yet they're dead, right? And quae rebat, he was asking the causam, the cause, eius rei, of this thing. Right? So in other words, he's trying to find the cause of why they died from wounds that really don't look that bad. Then you have ad it igator locum ubi cadaver cuiustam centauri jacebat et sagitam e vulnere traxit. Okay, so therefore he came, adit, he went up to, right, or he came toward the place, the locum, where a cadaver, right, a body, literally cadaver in English, where the body of a certain centaur, right, cuiustam means like a certain or some centaur, right, so he went to the body of a certain centaur, jacebat, was lying. And again, you'd use kuiostam here because it doesn't really matter who the centaur is, right? The idea is he's going up to a body. So whose body it is, doesn't really matter. It's just some body is kind of the idea. So where it was lying, right? So he sees all the bodies. He's trying to figure out what happened. So he goes to investigate one of the bodies, right? And he tracks it. He pulled out, you might say, a sagitam, an arrow, a vulnere from the wound, right? So he finds one who has an arrow sticking in him and he pulls it out, right, to look a little closer. Okay? Then you have haiktam and sive casu sive concilio deorum e manibus eus lapsa est et pedem leviter vulnerave. Okay, this is the sort of unfortunate fate of Pholus right here. So you have this, however, you have sive. So kind of, you want to translate this as whether, you might say, whether or, right? So whether something or something. So kasu, the ablative, is by chance. So you're saying it's the ablative of cause. So you're saying whether by chance, or you might even say by misfortune, or, right, sive, by the plan, the concilio of the gods, right? Concilio deorum means like the plan of the gods, the decree of the gods, kind of that idea. Plan probably works the best, honestly. So by the plan of the gods, this, and again, this is talking about the arrow, lapsa est, right? So what happened to the arrow? It fell. So you have a perfect deponent verb here. It comes from labor labi, which means to slip, right? So lapsus est is just the perfect tense of this deponent verb. So you can say it slipped is really what it is. So it slipped from his hand, e manibus eos, right? Or from his hands, you might say, plural. So he's holding the arrow in his hands, and again, it's saying either by bad luck, right? Kasu, either by bad fortune or by some divine plan, the arrow falls, and of course, vulnerave, it wounded, actually, it's perfect tense, his foot, his pedem, leviter, right? So lightly. So it just kind of grazes his foot is kind of the idea. It's the adverb form of lewis, right, which means light. So it lightly wounded his foot. But we know because it's poison, this is not going to end well, right? So Pholus kind of inadvertently kills himself because he's not, he just has this misfortunate or unfortunate, you might say, accident with the arrow. Then you have ille ex templo dolorem gravem per anima membra, or omnia membra, rather, sensit, et post breve tempus vi veneni ex animatus est. So ille is talking about him, meaning Pholus. So he, right, ex templo here is an adverb, right? It just means immediately, right? You might even say something like straight away, however you want to do it. So he immediately sensed, right? Sensed is perfect tense. He felt a dolorem gravem, right? A grave pain, right? Dolorem is dolor, the pain part, and gravem is telling you what type of pain, right? A grave or severe pain, right, is what he felt. So he felt this grave pain per omnia membra, throughout all his limbs, you might say, right? So all over his body, he starts to feel it because he's been poisoned, right? So he's feeling the poison going through his body. And after a breve tempus, after a short time, right? Remember, tempus, the neuter there, it looks a little bit different, but it's just, going with after, it's accusative. So after a short time, ex animatus est, he's killed, he's dead, right? He dies, you might say. Ex animo means to kill, so this is just the passive, perfect passive form, that he was killed. Now, when you have that passive verb, you're looking for an ablative, either an object or a person, right, to tell you what killed him. In this case, it's going to be really an object. It's we, by the force is how you want to translate that. So it's telling you he was killed by the force of the poison. Veneni is your genitive. Right? So the power or force of the poison killed him, right? So he very quickly realized he made a pretty terrible mistake. And he has this really sad ending, right? The poor centaur didn't want to fight anybody. He dies. And of course, the person who killed him inadvertently is Hercules, okay? So now Hercules comes back into the story. You have mox Hercules, qui relicos centauros secutus erat, ad speluncam redit, et magno cum dolore folum mortuum vidit. So soon Hercules, then you have this relative clause, a side note here. So Hercules, who had followed secutus erat, right? It's a deponent verb. So it's pluperfect tense, right? Yes, pluperfect tense. So who had followed the reliquos centauros, the rest of the centaurs, right? The remaining centaurs, you might say. So he had chased them off. So it's Hercules who had followed the other centaurs. Now, right, he soon, redit ad speluncam, he returned, perfect tense, redit, you can tell by that, the double I in the middle. He returned to the cave. right? And Caesar saw, Pholum mortuum, right? Dead Pholus. And he does this magno cum dolore with great sadness, you might say, right? He's kind of overcome by sadness. It's the ablative of manner is kind of what's happening here. And when you write it this way, you're really emphasizing the word magno, right? So great sadness. He saw dead Pholus, right? And he feels bad, right? Because, obviously he didn't want his friend to get killed. And I guess thinking about it, he probably realizes that he had a role in this. If he just hadn't drank the wine and caused this fight, Pholus would still be alive. Okay. Then you have multis cum lacrimis corpus amici ad sepulturam date, tum postquam alteram poculum vini ex hausit, somno se date. Okay. So now we have this really odd and ironic. It's kind of funny. We probably shouldn't laugh, but it is kind of funny. Ending where it really shows you a little bit about Hercules' personality. So you have multis cum lacrimis. So with many tears, again, we're emphasizing multis, right? So with many tears, dated, he gave, or you might even say like he carried or he brought the corpus amici, the body of his friend, ad sepulturam, for burial, right? To burial. So he gave it up for burial, meaning he went and buried it. Okay. Then you have tomb, right? After, postquam, after he drained, exhausted, he drained or he drank the rest of or you might even say alterum poculum, another cup of wine, he gave himself, sedated, somno, to sleep, meaning he went to bed. So if you play this out, he drank the wine that he wasn't supposed to. It caused a fight. He just murdered a bunch of centaurs who were trying to murder him. And at the end of the day, it got his friend Pholus killed, who did absolutely nothing. He's dead. He buries him. And then what does Herc do? He goes back and has another glass of the wine. He's probably thinking, why not? Everyone's dead. What's the point, right? So it's kind of this very odd ending, an ironic ending where he just, murdered a bunch of people and accidentally murdered his new friend. And he's like, what the heck? I might as well just sit and have a drink, right? So he drinks the wine, he passes out, and he goes to sleep. So this is kind of a sad ending to Pholus. And by the way, you probably want to look up Pholus. He is an interesting character in the Hercules story, and there's different versions that Ritchie isn't necessarily putting in this one. But he is Hercules' friend. And again, there's a couple ways you can interpret this. Either it's kind of my way, which is kind of funny and a little mean. Hercules just being like, what the heck, I might as well drink. But it is also kind of honoring, I guess, his friend. You could think of it that way, that he's drinking the wine in honor of his friend. But to me, it always rings a little cold that Hercules kills everybody and his friend dies. He's like, I'll just have a drink. But again, there is sort of a cultural element here. And it does tell you a little bit about Hercules, right? He does feel bad. But again, it's his own decision-making that's causing these problems. And it's not the first time or the last that his decisions are going to get his friends or family members killed, right? That's the whole point of the labors. He had, murdered his family. So it kind of all ties into this tragic story of who Hercules is. So hopefully the grammar felt, pretty comfortable in this section, that you didn't have too many problems with it. If there was anything that you're stuck on and you're not sure how to go forward, feel free to put it in the comments. I'll be happy to help you. But otherwise, just keep at it. Like I said, if you do the read and reread method and you really plan out all the vocab in advance, you really want to approach this like you're reading a story and not like a puzzle that you have to unpack. Read it for what it is, and hopefully you've caught, I know I said this in a lot of videos, but the vocab repeats itself. That's the good thing about Ritchie. He's using a lot of the same phrases, a lot of the same vocab, so hopefully the more you read it and the more comfortable you become, the less and less you have to do to really feel like you understand it. But either way, like I said, if you need anything, let me know, but otherwise just keep at it, keep reading, and again, look up the Hercules story if you can on your own to get more details. But otherwise, I hope you're enjoying it. Good luck.